In the world of game design, we often talk about immersion as a product of fidelity, more polygons, higher textures, more light rays. But as we move into 2026 and the anticipation for Blade Runner 2029 reaches its peak, I found myself looking backward. Not toward the future of the franchise, but toward the 29-year-old experiment that did something modern gaming has almost entirely forgotten how to do. In 1997, Westwood Studios released Blade Runner. It wasn't just a movie tie-in, it was a technical anomaly. While the rest of the industry was obsessed with the blocky 3D polygons of the original PlayStation, Westwood chose a different path: voxels. They built a world out of thousands of microscopic points of light, creating a filmic look that even today feels more like a living painting than a video game. But the true engineering marvel isn't just the graphics, it's the soul. Most games are a series of scripts waiting for you to trigger them. In Blade Runner, the clock is always ticking. The NPCs have their own lives, their own agendas, and most interestingly, the very nature of their humanity is randomized the moment you hit New Game. Today we're going to step back into the shoes of Ray McCoy. We aren't here for a chaotic speedrun or gimmick. We're here to perform a technical audit of a masterpiece, to see how this ghost in the machine still manages to feel more alive than the AI of 2026. I'm Maddie, and it's time to go system deep. The legal architecture of Blade Runner was as decayed as the city it depicted. Westwood didn't deal with the studio, they dealt with the Blade Runner Partnership, a group of bond guarantors who seized the rights after the 1982 film spiraled out of budget. This created a technical bottleneck. Westwood was permitted to use actor likenesses, but the original film footage and Vangelis's iconic master tapes were strictly off-limits. They had to rebuild the atmosphere from scratch. Frank Kalpaki had to reverse engineer the sound of the future because the legal gates were barred. And then came the data collapse. When Electronic Arts moved Westwood from Las Vegas to Los Angeles, the source code, the very DNA of the game, was lost. Not misplaced, purged. For 2 decades, the game existed only as a ghost on 4 physical discs, until the ScumVM team spent 8 years dissecting raw hex code to resurrect it. It's a miracle of digital archaeology, a game that survived its own creators, its own owners, and the very legal system designed to protect it. To understand Blade Runner, you have to understand the voxel. In the late 90s, the industry was at a crossroads. Polygons were the future, but they were ugly, sharp edges, low detail, and the texture warping was everywhere. Westwood Studios took a detour. Instead of building Ray McCoy out of flat triangles, they built him out of thousands of 3-dimensional pixels. From an engineering standpoint, this was a massive gamble. Voxels allowed for incredible lighting and fluid animation, but they couldn't be hardware accelerated by the graphics cards of the time. The CPU had to do all the heavy lifting. When you play this game, you aren't just seeing a character. You're seeing a processor pushing its absolute limits to simulate a human form. It is quite literally a ghost in the machine. A beautiful world is just a hollow stage if the actors are waiting for a script. This is where Blade Runner's second engineering feat comes into play: the real-time simulation. In most adventure games of the 90s, and even many today, an NPC exists in a state of stasis. They stand in one spot, waiting for the player to click on them. But in this city, the clock never stops. Characters like Lucy, Guzza, or the elusive Clovis have their own internal schedules. They move between sectors, they eat, they sleep, and they perform their own investigations. If you spend too long analyzing a photo in the Esper machine, you might miss a meeting at DNA Row. If you decide to go home and sleep, a suspect might be murdered while you're off duty. From a systems perspective, this creates a living RNG, a random number generator that isn't just a dice roll, but a physical consequence of time. You aren't just playing a game of find the trigger, you're playing a game of keep up with the world. Every time you start a new session of Blade Runner, the game's engine rolls the bones on the cast. In one playthrough, your partner might be a replicant working against you. In the next, they are a human just trying to survive. This isn't just a narrative branching path, it's a deep-coded variable. The AI doesn't change its dialogue, it changes its goals. It forces you, the player, to use the void conf machine not as a gameplay mechanic, but as a genuine tool of discovery, because even the code doesn't know the truth until the simulation begins. To navigate this simulation, the game provides a specific suite of tools. These aren't just inventory items, they are the interface between the detective and the machine's deep-coded variables. First, there is the Kia. This is your database. It live updates as you encounter NPCs and collect evidence, essentially acting as the game's external memory. It's where the real-time nature of the world is tracked and categorized. Then there is the Esper machine. As we've seen, this is our window into the voxel-based geometry of the world. It is a tool of patience, forcing the player to physically scan 3D space to find the data hidden within the flat image. And finally, there is the void conf machine. This is the ultimate empathy test. It's where the RNG is finally unmasked. It measures the physiological response to the stress, but in reality, it's querying the game's internal replicant or human flag that was set at the very beginning of your session. No audit of this world would be complete without the spinner. In the films, the spinner is a symbol of freedom and verticality. In the 1997 game, it's a clever piece of engineering used to mask the limitations of the era's loading times. While you're sitting in the cockpit watching the rain streak across the glass, the game is actually performing a silent handoff between its high-resolution background plates. It turns a technical necessity into a cinematic pause. It's one of the few places where the game allows you to breathe, offering a top-down view of a city that from this height looks perfectly ordered, despite the chaos you're about to find back on the ground. When the investigation fails and the dialogue stops, we're left with the friction of combat. In 1997, the action sequence was a difficult hurdle for an engine built on voxels and pre-rendered backgrounds. There is no cover system here, and no health regeneration. Instead, combat feels desperate. A series of stiff, high-stakes gambles, where a single mistimed click can end your investigation permanently. From an engineering standpoint, the combat is surprisingly analog. You have to account for the travel time of your rounds and the fact that your targets aren't just hitboxes, they are agents in a system trying to outmaneuver you. It's not about skill in the modern sense, it's about the raw, mechanical stress of a detective forced to use a tool he'd rather keep holstered. It's clunky, it's heavy, and it's perfectly in line with the industrial grit of the world. But the most complex system in Blade Runner isn't rendered in voxels or fired out of a gun. It's a hidden layer of logic we'll call the moral processor. While modern games often broadcast your alignment with glowing bars or Paragon pop-ups, Westwood opted for a silent audit. Every action you take feeds into a hidden empathy quotient variable that dictates how the world perceives your humanity. This isn't just about big story choices. It's the granular data. Are you the kind of detective who fires your weapon at a fleeing suspect without hesitation? Do you choose to administer the Voight comp test as a formal procedure or as a psychological weapon? The engine tracks these micro-interactions. If your aggression variable spikes too high, your colleagues at the LAPD start to treat you with a cold professional distance. Not because you're a bad cop, but because you're becoming a monster. Conversely, if you show too much empathy towards the skin jobs you're hunting, the system flags you as a potential sympathizer. This creates a fascinating technical tension. The game is constantly auditing your soul to decide which of the 13 possible endings you deserve. You aren't just playing as a character, you're unintentionally programming the conclusion of your own story. The truth of Ray McCoy isn't found in his DNA. It's found in the cumulative logic of every choice you've made over the last 30 hours. To capture the soul of this world, the audio had to be more than just a background track. Since Vangelis's iconic 1982 score couldn't be used directly due to licensing hurdles, composer Frank Klepacki had to perform a feat of reverse engineering. He didn't just write new music, he rebuilt the very textures of the original film's soundscape from the ground up. But the real engineering marvel is the ambient audio system. In 1997, sound was often static, but here, the audio is a living layer of the simulation. As you move between sectors, the mix changes dynamically. The low-frequency hum of the city's infrastructure breathes in and out, reacting to your location within the pre-rendered frames. It uses audio to sell the illusion of depth where the graphics cannot, tricking the brain into believing there is a mile of smog-filled air behind every voxel. Even the voice processing was intentional. Every line of dialogue was recorded with a specific noir weight, then processed through digital filters to make it feel like it was coming from a damp, metallic future. It's a masterclass in using sound to overcome hardware limitations, proving that if you can make the world sound real, the player's mind will fill in the rest of the pixels. Auditing a game from 1997 in 2026 represents a unique set of engineering hurdles. Because Blade Runner relied on the CPU rather than the GPU to render its voxels, modern processors are actually too fast for it. In the original code, the speed of the simulation was tied to the clock speed of your hardware. Run this on a modern rig without a community-made wrapper, and the world moves at a frantic, unplayable pace. It serves as a reminder that this game was built for a very specific moment in computing history, a moment where the software was actually more ambitious than the silicon it lived on. In 1997, Westwood Studios didn't just build a game, they built a clockwork machine and invited us to step inside. In an era where we are obsessed with the future of AI, Blade Runner reminds us that the most immersive systems aren't necessarily the ones with the most pixels. They are the ones that respect the player's time, and the ones that randomly, quietly, decide for themselves what it means to be alive. If you've enjoyed this dive into the architecture of the past, consider subscribing. Once again, I'm Maddie, and this has been System Deep.